I said reporting. It doesn't
Reporting
matter.
for duty.
You silly goose.
Silly goose.
That jet lag.
You making analytics over there? You in Power BI?
I just have been seeing all the like furor on LinkedIn from people of my generation about the story in the Times from the last couple of days that's called the Great Gen X Career Meltdown or something, and it's all about creative professionals in their late 40s and early 50s not having jobs. I'm like, cool, great.
Just what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
You know what I always say? It's a sick, sad world, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a good thing you're funny.
I'm really hoping this podcast works out because, you know.
Well, David, you know, pirate some games on your cell phone. You can join my other podcast.
Mm-hmm. You know, if I end up with a lot of free time on my hands, I might have to start.
Sick.
We're going to lean harder into that.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
We missed you.
Top of the morning to you, Stan, as they say.
Cheers.
Is that what they say?
No, not a single person didn't say that to me. Not a one.
Did you drive stick?
I did not drive stick. Driving on the opposite side of the road was enough for me, to be honest. And I don't know how to drive a stick. So
Yeah. Driving on the left side is it forces
confusing.
you to completely reverse everything in your brain.
Yeah.
Yep. I did have a lovely Peugeot.
Nice.
It was like a brand new car.
Yep.
It had all kinds of features, wireless charging for my phone. It had like a lane guide where it was like if I drifted too far to the side, it would like move me back into the lane, which was pretty wild.
Now, David, you wouldn't understand this since you only drive American, but I've had a car that does that for years.
Yeah.
Well,
my cars are pretty old.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, you do drive a Model T.
yes, you also hate my cars for some reason. You have an unreasonable hate for my two Fords that I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the Irish do the same thing that the Brits do, which is they don't use stop signs. It's just roundabouts.
There's many roundabouts. There are some stop signs, but it's a ton of roundabouts. Yeah.
How did that go?
Oh, that's no problem.
No problem.
I'm used to that. They have those even up in Wisconsin sometimes.
Yeah, but they're not as aggressive.
That's not a Europe
than
only
Wisconsin.
thing.
Yeah.
But the ones in Europe, or at least in the Britannic Islands, Britannia, because Ireland is a country. I feel like there's a lot more rules and expectations with those. And if you do it wrong, they will let you know.
Yes, true.
They'll call you a knobhead.
Yeah.
Do some
Everybody's
gestures
so
at
friendly,
you.
though. I can't imagine. I can't imagine it. The hardest part I had, honestly, with driving over there was how narrow the lanes are.
Yeah.
It's so tight. And I was constantly like, oh my God, am I going to, like, there was one time where I like moved over to the side to let oncoming traffic go by on a narrow road. And like, I clipped one of those like parking or like curb barrier sticks. You know what I'm talking about? Like one of those plastic sticks that's on the side of the road sometimes.
Yep.
Clip.
Oh, no.
Yep. It came back up though.
That's
It
good.
survived.
Did the police chase you?
No police chases.
The Garda.
The Garda. Yeah. The Garda. Yeah, but it was great. It was great. I do want to give a shout out to a store in Galway that I went to, Dungeons and Donuts.
Ooh.
Which was a lovely little LGS that I stopped by. They were having their store championship. It was the end of their store championship. It was standard. I was almost about to like pop in if it had been limited or something like that to play. But this store had great. It was like 2 floors. Nice little store on the first floor. On the second floor, they had a play area, but they had like gamer geek themed donuts there as well, including like a Pokeball donut and like some other ones that were really fun. So Dungeons and Donuts, if you're ever around there, check them out.
Did you eat a donut?
We did. We let the kids get one. They got a Pokeball.
Was it
Did
good?
they eat it or did they throw it?
It was a red velvet. I think it was red velvet with like a perfect image of a Pokeball on the top and then filled with like chocolate. Yeah, it was great. This must be very compelling for the listeners.
Certainly for me.
Now they're just hungry.
Hello and welcome to episode 315 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago. And with me on the line from the Boston Tea Party area, it's Devon O'Donnell, aka Doomwake.
Notably not Ireland.
No, I wish.
Only one of us went there this weekend. How are things?
The pipes.
Can either of you do an Irish accent?
I wouldn't dare.
I mean, my last name is O'Donnell, and I still can't do one. So
I'll do it off mic if you want me to, Stan. But
Not too
I'm not
hard.
doing that. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Did the people in Ireland, did they know you were not Irish as soon as they heard you speak, or did anyone think you were a local?
You know who everybody thought was local was my 9-year-old son, who is absolutely obsessed with wearing flat caps and wears one nearly every day, even before he went over there. And so he was just wandering around town, and people kept stopping him, saying, "Oh, I love your cap. I love your cap. You look like one of us. I love your cap."
Where'd you get it?
Good lad. Do you have any jacket potatoes?
No jacket potatoes.
Oh.
No, I had some curry. I had plenty of fish and chips.
Mushy peas?
I actually had a great steak too. Like the beef there is quite good as well.
They got all that grassland to wander.
Yes, they do.
And you were the Godfather, Dave Harburger. by the
I
way.
am returned.
He's back
Godfather returned.
in the flesh.
On this week's show, we're going to talk about the ban of Underworld Breach in Modern, which happened today as of recording, in one of the least surprising bans in modern history, I think.
It was technically a ban list. It is legally obligated to be called a ban list.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We're also going to chat briefly about the results of the Explorer Arena Championships on Magic Arena. When I was doing the notes, I thought it was Pioneer, but alas, they still call it Explorer over there.
Yeah, there's not really a ton that's missing at this point, but there was an article. I think there was maybe 5 or 6 cards from MTGO League decks that are missing. So it's close.
Yeah. It was in the ban article today.
It was, yeah.
Actually, they had that data. So we can talk about that in a minute too.
And we actually got a pretty interesting listener question that I thought might be nice to toss in as a wind down. But before all that, let's housekeep. If you'd like to support the show, you can find us at patreon.com/thedivedown. We have a new episode of What's That in Your Pocket just went live last week. And it was episode 4. And Shane and I have been talking, collecting feedback. And we think we're ready to take the video game podcast public sooner than later. And although we haven't decided whether we're going to publicize the back catalog yet, what we are planning to do is record a react-isode to the Nintendo Direct Switch 2 announcement that is happening this week. And that will probably be the first public episode of the Dive Down. I'm probably going to publish that on the Dive Down feed.
Yeah.
Not forever, but for the first episode as a preview. A lot of the listeners I expect us to have on the video game podcast are going to be Dive Down listeners who also like video games and may have an interest in handheld gaming. Maybe they just miss Shane. Maybe they want more of me. All things can be true.
True. Now, Devon and I are going to launch our Ireland-focused travel podcast after this, so that he and I are just going to reminisce every week about our mutual vacations in Ireland. So that will also be in the feed.
Yeah,
eventually.
I can go into the archive. I can probably find some photos, and we can maybe make an Instagram account.
Yeah, it's great. We'll talk about photos on the podcast. People love that.
Well, we can give them the, what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, anyways.
Totally.
So check it out. And thanks to everyone who's been listening to What's That in Your Pocket for the last couple months now. Your feedback was really appreciated. It's made for a better podcast, and we are really excited to expand the Dive Down Media Network. And hopefully one day I can finally say goodbye to the Dive Down once and for all and just spend my days with my first love, which is playing emulators on my Nintendo 3DS.
I thought your first love was comic books.
I got Marvel Ultimate Invasion, the trade paperback right here, David.
It's the other first love.
Looks good, right?
Yep.
Video games were the first love, actually.
I do also want to give a quick shout out to a lovely comic book store I went to in Dublin, Forbidden Planet International.
Whoa.
Great comic book and game store. Very clean and well organized. If you're ever in Dublin, worth it.
David, in your travels and visiting all these nerd stores, did you pick up any good souvenirs that you brought home with you?
No, I just bought a couple of packs of Aetherdrift from one store, and then we bought a Minecraft comic book from the place in Dublin. But it's a great store.
That's it. Okay.
I didn't know enough about comics. I wanted to get you a comic book, but they're so specific. I wasn't sure even what you were looking for at this point.
You can text. You can WhatsApp me.
No gifts. No gifts were gotten.
It's also, David, it's the thought that counts. You don't have to give me the perfect thing. I just appreciate a thoughtful present for the sake of reminding me that you were thinking of me while you were abroad.
Well, next time.
There won't be a next time. I don't think you're ever going to get me any presents. Shane would have gotten me a present.
He probably would have. He's more thoughtful than I am.
Mm-hmm. And I refused to tell Devon my address, so he wouldn't be able to send me anything.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything. I wasn't going to go there, but you know.
Get yourself a Dive Down souvenir over at thedivedown.com/store. We got swag. Get yourself a souvenir with our friends at Heavy Play. HeavyPlay.com gives you 10% off your first order of their awesome card game accessories with promo code TheDiveDown2025. And you can also save some money with Mana Traders. If you use promo code TheDiveDown, all one word, you'll get 25% cash back after 3 months of Mana Trader service. Check it all out.
Okay.
We're
getting into it now.
We're
getting into it. Underworld Breach banned. And we had
shocked Pikachu face.
Yeah. Oh,
that's right. And Carmen Klemperens wrote the article, or most of the articles in this BNR. I don't know that I recognize Carmen from previous BNR articles. Obviously, we know Carmen well from being a grinder once upon a time and now being WotC staff. I don't know that I've seen her write BNRs before. And I thought this was a very transparent article, especially the modern portion, which is, to be honest, all I really read.
Oh, I read a bunch of the portions for what it's worth. But yeah, the modern one I think is pretty straightforward. They gave us a bunch of new toys in December, and one of those new toys broke something that people had suspected would be irrevocably broken at some point in time, and today's the day.
Yeah.
Today's the day that Modern no longer has Yawgmoth's Will in the format. Long after Pioneer had it banned, and Legacy also had it banned. Now it's gone from Modern.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to somebody if you kind of travel back in time and talk to somebody who started around Theros Beyond Death, and you fast forward a couple of years and you told them like, hey, March 31st, 2025, Underworld Breach is banned in Modern, their initial reaction would be like, wait, it's not already banned?
Yeah,
so
fully agree. It's surprising that it took this long to do it, but here we are.
There were 3 portions of the Modern article that jumped out to me that I abridged even more so. So I don't necessarily want to go through entire paragraphs, but I compressed them a little bit because I think there were 3 points that made their thinking really clear, both about the performance of Breach in the Modern metagame, but also how they're looking at Modern in general and how they're looking at Modern ahead. So to set the stage, the article explains that in December's updates to the Modern ban list, they did a lot to breathe new life into the format with their unbannings. The 4 cards we previously discussed in our Unban card dive series: Mox Opal, Green Sun Zenith, Splinter Twin, and Faithless Looting. However, Mox Opal, teaming up with Underworld Breach in particular, created an explosive and resilient combo deck, which was not something that the WotC staff was happy with, nor I as a Modern player.
One thing that I was glad that they did not say here was that it was not something that they didn't anticipate. You know what I mean? Like, I think that pretty much everybody knew that Breach was going to use Mox Opal. I think that them going, but it's not something we were happy with, is it implied to me that they kind of thought Breach might be very good with Opal, and they weren't playing the we were so surprised kind of game.
Yeah, and maybe they didn't anticipate how difficult it would be to counterplay this deck.
Yeah.
Which is what the next section goes into. With the amount of pressure that Underworld Breach put on the format, WotC staff expects the format to change a good bit with its departure, especially sideboards. And this is one of the parts that really stood out to me because it just confirmed all of our experiences. Previously, we saw players committing well over half of their sideboards to try and suppress the combo, and now they're optimistic that the format can open up a bit and allow for a wider range of strategies to exist. I think this echoes what we've been talking about for months now, which is you have to dedicate half of your sideboard because that's how hard it is to hate out a deck like this. And I'm willing to believe that that's the part that they didn't realize would be so difficult, is beating it with 1 or 2 hate cards isn't really enough. You need to layer the hate, and you have to sometimes approach it from multiple different axes, either point removal for their artifacts and enchantments, or graveyard hate, or stony silence effects, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, like this is kind of just sort of what Modern is right now, where if you maybe equate this back to, I don't know, the last time that you got to play Opal, right? 2018, 2019 era. Affinity was a deck that was very powerful, but if they drew the Stony Silence, that was it. You know, it was really hard for Affinity to be the Stony Silence. And given how like you said, layered these decks are in terms of their threats, they just have plan after plan after plan. And it's like, yeah, sure, you drew your Stony Silence, but then you just lose to Saga tokens and their fair plan. It's like, yeah, it was a lot.
I like the last sentence of this paragraph, which is, looking past Temur Grinding Breach, Modern looks pretty good. And I agree. Finally, we're planning on keeping an eye on the decks that were strong enough to hang despite Temur Grinding Breach's prevalence. Namely, Boros Energy decks and Dimir Oculus decks. Okay. They were hanging by a thread, Dimir Oculus was. As well as Eldrazi variants, Amulet Titan, and Orzhov Blink. This next sentence I put in bold for emphasis. We're watching red-white energy variants the closest to see if reasonable counterplay emerges in the coming regional championship qualifier season, and we're excited to see what players cook up.
Do we want to approach that sentence first, I guess? Do we agree with this implication that potentially energy becomes de facto the best deck again? I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I don't know what the energy versus Orzhov Blink kind of world looks like if those go head to head against each other all the time with a little smattering of Eldrazi in there.
I just feel like if you're the Boros player, Eldrazi's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to imagine that clearing up cyber cards that were once dedicated to the Temur matchup somehow improves the Eldrazi matchup significantly. But maybe I'm underselling it.
I mean, this is something that Stan and I learned when we were playing games and talking about the deck for your regional championship, where we were trying to figure out what the best card that you could play. And like, really, there wasn't a lot of good options. The best one that we came up with was Molten Rain. I mean, personally, I think that the energy decks are likely going to be at least the ones that are successful in the early going. I think those ones are going to be the ones that splash blue for Consign on the board, because Consign is also, believe it or not, good against the Orzhov deck. They got a lot of triggers. So I think hitting both of those decks is pretty huge.
Yeah, people need to keep remembering that Consign is Stifle in addition to counter colorless spells. So it's got some of both there for yeah.
In fact, it's a Stifle before it is a counterspell.
Right.
The way the card is templated.
Exactly. I mean, so do we think Boros becomes top of the meta again? It has been all over the place. You know, it was down to 4th at some points in time. What do you think is going to happen?
I think they are correct about what the top decks of the metagame are.
Right.
But we haven't seen an environment where Boros can exist sans Breach, sans One Ring Aetherdrift.
Right.
If you're picking up what I'm trying to put down, which is the deck was really stifled by the December BNR announcement. And even though it emerged in the initial weeks as still a very powerful strategy, I think part of that had to do with the fact that people were still figuring out how to play and beat Breach. And then once Breach became a more known entity, it clearly became the best deck. And then weeks after that, Eldrazi started picking up, and then we started to see the Orzhov deck. So I think we needed more time for the format to evolve post the December BNR, and maybe we now have even more time for the format to evolve. But I don't see it necessarily evolving in a way that Boros suddenly becomes the de facto best deck.
Yeah.
Compared to like something like Eldrazi, for instance.
It's definitely going to be good. For sure. It is one of, like that sort of tier one, I guess, if you would call it, would be, for me at least, Boros, Orzhov, and Eldrazi. Those are kind of like the rock, paper, scissors. And then maybe you have like Amulet, Dimir, Storm on the outside looking in. Going back to what Stan was saying earlier, right now, it really, when the bans happened, a lot of people's initial reaction was like, okay, well, what does Boros look like? And we just didn't have time to figure out Boros, because by the time that people were figuring it out, Breach was just everywhere. So we haven't really had a format where we have, a fixed, quote unquote, with the Boros bans that happen. So it'll be, it's going to be a good deck, but I don't know. I think it's sort of like tied for me in that tier one, I guess.
Yeah. It feels to me like we're entering, we just had combo at the top of the meta, and it feels like we're going to have all these like various flavors of like a mid-range kind of thing going on at the top now, where it's like, okay, Boros is our aggro mid-range, and then Blink is our like tricky one. And then, so it feels like we're going to enter this kind of like board statey creatures attacking kind of version of Modern for a little bit. So I'll be curious to see if that leaves a space for a different combo deck to come up to the top, or if something else is going to happen.
If everyone's playing to the board, it sounds like Wrath of the Skies, Supreme Verdict decks have a lot to chew on.
Yeah, maybe.
Those decks kind of get beat up by Eldrazi, though, is the problem.
Yeah.
That's okay. Fair. Can't have all good matchups.
That is true.
You're not mono
unless you're playing Jund.
You know what those decks get beat up by? They get beat up by not having the One Ring anymore. That's what Jeskai Control is really missing.
Who needs the One Ring when you have Isochron Scepter?
Yeah, and Orum's Chant.
Yeah.
And that new tech. Okay, so any other thoughts or predictions about this next phase of Modern? Like, what are you thinking about for RCQ season? Stan, you're almost certainly Energy, right?
Undoubtedly. Just trying to figure out whether it's worth it to still play blue. And I'm guessing you kind of have to for Consigned to Memory, because I can't imagine Eldrazi is going anywhere. And I don't know that Boros in and of itself has enough ways to beat Eldrazi other than hoping you can outrace them. But they just have so many ways to either clog up the board, blow up your lands, blow up your permanents, create a bunch of Scions or spawn or whatever Kozilek's command does, that I think being able to beat them on the stack is maybe your best option.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like every card in their deck is a 10 out of 10 against you, and you can maybe fight against a couple of them, but have nothing that covers them all. Yeah.
Devon, what are you looking at? Are you looking at Eldrazi? That's the deck that you were playing, that you played in Charlotte.
Yeah, it is. I'm probably gonna start with Boros just to kind of get a feel for it. It's a little bit easier to build Boros, I think, than Eldrazi, because I'm still not sure if you want to do like the combo Harrigas version or if you want to splash blue entirely. So I'm probably with Stan on the Boros with just Consign to the board.
Yeah.
Wasn't Breach Eldrazi's toughest matchup?
Yes. So it definitely, like, that gone definitely makes Eldrazi a bit better. But the weird thing is, Eldrazi was, in my opinion, the best Karn deck, and without Breach, you probably don't even bother playing Karn. So it's trying to figure out, like, what do you want to play instead of the Karns? Maybe you just go back to like 4 Chrysalis main deck. But I'll maybe do some experimenting. But I'm probably going to start with Boros.
You could play the new Ugin.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, but you can't cast it off Eldrazi Temple.
Yeah.
So play the Tron lands.
Yeah, you got to play Tron.
We'll see where that's going.
Why not both?
Very, very shortly, we'll see.
Yeah, that's the other
coming
bit,
out.
I'm just not a Tron gamer.
Dragonstorm is going to be here in a week.
Also, how the hell am I going to get Ugins? Those are mad expensive, aren't they?
I haven't looked at how much, but I got to assume they are.
2 words, Devon. Crack packs.
Works out for me.
So basically, if Dave can buy the packs and then mail them to me, then,
Yeah.
I got you. I am going to be looking at, for my one RCQ, and we'll talk about this later, I think I'm going to try some Blink online coming out of this, or depending on what happens with Tarkir, and I'm going to be trying Domain Aggro.
You're going to love it. You're going to love Blink.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to love Domain Aggro.
I mean, I like Domain Aggro in paper, like Zoo in paper, but Blink, it feels like a lot harder to play in paper, but it would be pretty good on Magic Online. Manage those triggers for me, please.
You're a shadow gamer, so I feel like you would like Domain. It's got creatures and stubborn denials, you know?
Exactly. I love it. Love that. So I don't know. That's just where I'm looking, just to be a contrarian. Who knows? I mean, I guess if Boros is not running $50 copies of the Ranger Captain of Eos, that might be open to me as well, since I carry those cards around for 5 years and then just sold them before they became modern playable.
I didn't sell my breaches. I still have those.
I didn't get a chance to either. Yeah. It is what it is. I mean, people still play that card in EDH,
True.
right? So it'll probably be worth a little bit of money.
It's a game changer, I think.
It should be if it's not.
They should call it a format changer.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's what we're looking at, what we think is maybe coming up as far as the ban goes. I do want to talk about the other side of this for a second, which is, Devon, you said this announcement was a little disappointing when we were talking in Discord. You might have other reasons for that. We can talk about those in a minute, but a lot of people were hoping for more unbans in this announcement. Were you surprised there were no more unbans this time, or what do you think?
Can I go on a soapbox like for 30 seconds?
Yes.
The people.
It's why we started the podcast, is for us to have more soapboxes to stand on.
All right, good. I just wanted to make a quick public service announcement to the people who realistically thought that Deathrite Shaman was going to get unbanned. Every single one of you are out of your mind. And if that offends people listening to this podcast right now, I don't apologize. You're out of your mind.
I mean, I agree with that. There's no reason to think that it would be any better in modern than it was in legacy as far as pervasiveness. And you know what I mean? Like, it was busted in legacy. I think it would be as busted in modern, or pervasive or annoying. Like, I don't know which flavor of busted you want to say it was, but I don't think there's any shot Deathrite ever comes off of that either.
Please, God, no.
Yeah.
Do you know how much Deathrite costs right now in paper?
$23.
I'm looking at
around
a
there.
price tag of 30.
30.
Jeez.
Wow.
All because of the BNR. Basically, a week ago, it was 4.
Yeah.
It was all hype.
Well,
it's the new Splinter Twin.
It's the new Splinter Twin, which is, there are other cards that you should be looking at, I think.
Yes.
For that, like, Birthing Pod, Tay, like, I would be looking at those cards personally if I was gonna put some money on the line for that. But I'm not sure when those ones are coming either. But I feel like they're just the most likely to be unbanned. But were you disappointed that there were no more unbans, or did you feel like it wasn't going to happen this time?
It's really hard for me to be disappointed when I'm trying to think of the best way to formulate this. I mean, if you go back to the previous bit, the unbans, right? Mox Opal, Faithless Looting, we really never had any inclination that either of those would ever come off the ban list. And
True.
It seems like they are like, their decisions are very volatile when it comes, or have the potential to be volatile when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it's really hard for me to set any sort of expectations with them doing unbans. So, maybe they just felt it wasn't the right time, but it's weird to go from a bombshell like that and then just kind of have this sort of announcement where it just feels like there's nothing here,
Yeah.
But they can't all be bombshells.
No,
Sometimes
they can't.
You just
I know,
need a
I know.
modest format correction.
I know.
Yeah.
If they were all bombshells, then we would have no ban list.
Right.
Exactly. I think they're saving it for some other time when the format feels a little stale, but they don't think anything is broken, right? Like, maybe nothing's changed or nothing's made an impact, and then they'll be like, hey, let's drive a little interest in modern before a spotlight series coming up or something. We'll unban this one card and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, the timing of it will be they'll probably have RCQ season with this current format, and then the next ban list, I believe, should be before the next round of RCs. So there could be like you said, maybe this format is just all Boros, Blink, and Eldrazi, and they're like, well, it's will be expected, but let's spice it up a little bit. So
Yeah. So I think that's the strategy. It reminds me a little bit of what they talk about sometimes with when old cards that are valuable turn up in guest slots and stuff like that. That idea of reprint equity. Now we have ban list equity that Wizards of the Coast has created, and they're like, okay, we have these we only have a limited number of these kind of excitement cards to play, so we'll kind of ration them out over time. Stan, you okay with no unbans similar to Devon?
I would have been shocked if there was anything unbanned today.
Yeah, same. Okay. You want to talk about the rest of the bands at all, real quick? Devon, were you disappointed about Standard? You want to talk about Standard for a minute?
I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed, but I made this in my bandless prediction video a couple weeks ago, and I, sort of said, well, my wish list would be them getting rid of Rage and Beans, but I think that given how the format has kind of churned a little bit, especially with Aetherdrift, that I predict them to do nothing, and that's ultimately what they did. The big problem I have with specifically Beans and Rage being the two best decks in the format, I guess you throw up Town in there too. Those are the three kind of pillars. The big issue with specifically Rage and Beans is the new set that's coming out is Tarkir. And Tarkir is just a plane that's all about 3 colors, right? All about 3 color gold cards, mid-range 3 and 4 mana creatures, and it is really hard to justify playing any sort of 3 mana mid-range 3 and 4 drop or 3 color 3 and 4 drop in a format that is so dominated by red at the very end of the spectrum and then Beanstalk all the way over here. You're going to get red's going to go under you, Beans is going to go over you, and you can't cast Siege Rhino in that format. You know what I mean? So It's like, it seems like it's very difficult for the lot of the gold Tarkir cards to make an impact, and those do seem to be the marquee cards of the set. So it's kind of tough. We'll see what happens, but I was a little disappointed.
Although you can't cast Siege Rhino, maybe you can cast a Skirmish Rhino.
Well, the other problem, even just without red and beans, is that the mana is not good enough to play cards like that.
I was just going to ask, like, what's our assessment of the mana? I didn't get a chance to look at the full spoiler yet because I think it just all came out today. Then they were like, you're going to like the rare land cycle here. There's
no rare land cycle.
Is there anything?
Well, there's rare lands, but they're not dual lands. They're single color lands.
Yeah.
So the only duels we have are the same ones we had in the previous Tarkir, the uncommon tap tri-lands.
Yeah. So I can't imagine that lands are, or mana's in a state that really feels like it's conducive to casting 3 color spells. But
yeah, I mean, if you look at the top decks in Standard, right, you have mono red or Gruul, mono color or 2 color deck plays 12. The Gruul deck plays 12 dual lands, whatever, that's fine. And then if you look at a deck like Pixie, for example, like that is a 3 color deck, but every card in their deck costs 1 and 2 mana, right? And they get to play 12 fast lands. If you are trying to play a deck with 3 and 4 mana cards, you can't play 12 fast lands. That's just not tenable. So you then have to figure out, okay, well, what's my, Surveil Land Verge split, or you start getting into playing like the Restless lands, but you do have to play a lot of tap lands in order to make sure you can turn on the Verges. So it gets, I don't know. I mean, there's probably a way to do it, but you do have to sort of like play going third a lot of the time with all these tap lands.
Yeah.
And you can't go third against red.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see what happens in the next few weeks here. There's a Laughing Dragon tournament in Modern in a couple of weeks that we'll see some paper results. We'll be watching challenges, and we'll be keeping one eye on Standard as well with the new set getting into it and all those kind of things. So we'll see those.
Coolio. Y'all want to talk briefly about Explorer and what the heck is going on over there?
What's Explorer?
Once upon a time, in an effort to make MTG Arena a little bit more reflective of the paper Magic environment, the folks at Wizards of the Coast introduced a format on Arena called Explorer, which was meant to be a stopgap solution until they had the full Pioneer card pool in Arena. Since then, it took years for us to get closer to Pioneer. They eventually released Pioneer Masters at the end of 2024?
Yes. Yeah.
We're still missing a few cards, though. So, unfortunately, the format isn't called Pioneer yet. It's still called Explorer.
Yeah, I mean, here are the cards that are missing for what it's worth. Kazul's Toll Collector is the one that's missing the most.
Critical.
I don't even know what that card is. Warping Whale, which is that colorless card that we're familiar with. Battle at the Bridge from Aether Revolt. Triton Shorestalker, Nissa's Defeat, Encroaching Waste, and Roast are the 7 cards that they say we're missing.
You know what? It's A shame that they can't even still fully get Pioneer on Arena because they just give us so few reasons to be involved in Pioneer whatsoever. I just don't think they really care if people play it or not.
Well, it's
And that's fine, I guess. Whatever.
I mean, it's a format that everybody had some energy for last year, right? And now it's like it's no longer an RC
supported.
format, so people are kind of like whatever. But it's so strange to me that they chose this as one of the formats or the format for their arena championships, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the other arena formats, you have Timeless, which is a format where you can play Dark Ritual, Chrome Locks, and Show and Tell. So they probably don't want to showcase that one.
Yeah.
And then you have Alchemy, which is, I think, fun for people who enjoy the rebalancing cards. But I don't know if they've ever had an Alchemy arena championship. They may have. And then the only other format you have there is Historic, which I'm going to be honest with you, I don't even know what Historic is, like what sets are legal in it. I think it's like a year of Standard plus Modern Horizons and Lord of the Rings. But I could be wrong with that.
I mean, it's super weird. I mostly meant I'm surprised it wasn't Standard.
Oh, sure. I think the last one was Standard.
So, yeah, it's just strange to me that one didn't align. But Pioneer's a format that occasionally we care about. There'll probably be a showcase, and we haven't talked about it lately. What was going on in Pioneer Explorer here?
Mono Red was going on, Dave.
Yikes. Okay.
Oh, it was.
So this was an invitational, and if I'm understanding this correctly, there were only 50 players playing in the thing.
Yep.
And Mono Red wasn't even the most popular deck. Rakdos Midrange was the most popular deck, followed by Mono Red was the second most, and then Is It Phoenix, and then Dimir Bounce, followed by Mardu, followed by Control.
I believe there was a statistic, and the listeners can maybe fact check me on this. I believe there was 11 total red decks in the event, and 10 of them made day 2. I think.
What?
Yeah, I think only one of them missed.
That is brutal.
Also, another fun statistic: the red deck on day 2 had I kid you not, a 100% non-mirror win rate.
What?
It checks out.
Not joking.
Checks out.
I'm not joking when I say that.
That is absurd.
If we look at the win rate matrix on mtgdex.net for this tournament, Mono Red, aka Red Deck Wins, is one of 2 decks with a positive win rate. We have a handful at 50%, we have Mardu Greasefang at 54%, and then we have Red Deck Wins at 66% with no bad matchups across the board.
No bad matchups.
No bad matchups.
It's absurd.
6 of the top 8 decks were Mono Red. The entire top 4 was Mono Red. And most of the top 8 decks were basically identical. 2 of them were literally identical, 75s. Looking at the deck, most of it is standard legal, with the exception of Bone Crusher Giant and Kumano faces Kakazan. I think were the only main deck cards I saw that were not standard legal. And it's essentially the mouse package from the Mono Red standard deck, plus Kumano and Bone Crusher. And then like the other good red cards in standard Mono Red.
Yeah.
If I had a sign to tap, this is where I would tap the sign.
Here's the thing that blows my mind about this deck, for what's worth. And I know that it's an aggro deck. I guess I was expecting this deck to play Fable still.
Too slow.
You know what I mean? And it's not, just because it's Pioneer, quote unquote, and Fable is a good card. But yeah, we're not doing that. We're just going as fast as we can.
It has other 3 and 4 drops. It's got Screaming Nemesis as 3 mana. It's got Sunspine Lynx, which is 4 mana.
Yeah.
And it has Burst Lightning, which is anywhere from 1 to 5 mana.
Right.
I just noticed that the winner, who was obviously on Mono Red, their name was Charmander.
Which is pretty funny.
I think
Very
that's their
good. The deck
arena
choice.
handles, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's their arena handles.
The deck
Even
choice
so.
checks out.
Except for Paul Cheon. I know his is Humph, but
Paul.
Maybe worth pointing out the only non-red decks in the top 8 were Teamer Analyst and Is It Phoenix.
Is it Phoenix still kicking it?
Still good. Treasure Cruise, that one, they still let you play that one.
Yeah.
So this is kind of interesting, and maybe this is a discussion. I don't know if you guys want to have this discussion, but with me. But basically,
We're gonna make you have it by yourself, Devon.
okay,
Just
that's fine.
have the
That's fine. I'll
discussion.
talk to myself. This is the soapbox. I wonder what would have happened if this tournament was like, I don't know, 2 weeks earlier, right? The fact that this specific event happened the day before the ban list, it's like, well, they've kind of already pushed everything out. They can't really do these very, very last minute changes. And with how completely dominant this red deck was over literally every other deck in the field, I wonder if these are the type of results, and I can't remember if this has ever happened before, but if a format like Explorer would potentially give them pause to act on standard. Because as we're saying, this deck is 90% legal in standard. Like, this is basically the same deck. And if it's doing this well in a format that has arguably a higher power level than standard, then why is something like this okay for standard? You know, I think that's maybe, not sure.
Maybe this was addressed in the article and I just overlooked it because I didn't read the standard portion. But I feel like standard is so obviously the flagship format in competitive Magic this year. 3 out of the 4 quarters of the year are dedicated to standard RCQs, for instance. 6 sets being published this year going directly to standard, including Universes Beyond. Maybe they are more skittish about doing bans in standard because they want people to feel more player and consumer confidence investing into standard decks, because they are more or less demanding players to keep up with the new set every 2 months to participate with the format.
Yeah, I mean, what it says here at the beginning, and this article is written by Jadine Comparens. Our approach to standard banned and restricted updates remains unchanged. We are committed to leaving the format as untouched as possible from one rotation to the next, banning cards only if something truly problematic to the health of the format emerges. Once a year, right before rotation, we'll consider more nuanced changes with the goal of making the format as fun and dynamic as possible for the duration of the next cycle. So they said when this whole thing started, we're only going to try to do standard bans once a year, and so they're sticking to it for now. You know, and that means September, I believe is when the actual rotation is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Dev, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about Esper Pixie being a modern power level deck in standard. Is it so bad that the ebb and flow has pushed Domain and Red into the top of that metagame in this current iteration of the format?
I mean, so like, you know, for example, I'll go to Goldfish and just see what the metagame data suggests here. So over the past 30 days, you got 16% Esper. If you combine Red and Gruul, 18% Gruul, and then Domain's a distant third at this point with less than 10%, 6.9. So it seems to be like Esper and Red are kind of the, you know, tier 1A or whatever. Which interesting now that, you know, I didn't realize Domain had been that low, but in any case, yeah, I don't know. It's just the red cards are really good. And I think part of what makes me think that they're waiting until the rotation is that a lot of these decks are losing key pieces, right? Esper is going to lose basically their entire mana base because all the pain lands rotate and half of the fast lands rotate. The Xur deck is losing, well, Xur, so can't play Xur anymore. And basically every single card in the red deck remains legal. I think there's only one card that rotates out of the whole red package. So part of me thinks that maybe they're just waiting until rotation for, you know, hopefully something, maybe they could act in the red deck. But I don't know, man, just the red deck is really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
It's about damn time. I wonder how this deck would do in Modern. That'd be a fun experiment for a league. Give it some lightning bolts, some faithless lootings.
I will say I have seen people digitally sleeve up Hardfire Hero before. I think they were playing like Leyline of Resonance and Scale Up with like, because you get better pump spells in Modern. You get Might of Old Grossa and stuff like that. So I think they played the Fling too.
So interesting stuff. The Fling land.
David, you're on the case.
Yeah, I could do this for fun. I got a 4-1 with 8 whack one time. Surely they couldn't be harder than that. Awesome. All right, so that's Explorer. the Arena Championships, can I insert one little thing here?
Sure.
And that is, I want to say goodbye to Aetherdrift Limited. I had a lot of fun with you, Aetherdrift Limited, and looking forward to returning to Tarkir. One of the best draft sets of all time, of course. Cons.
Yep.
We'll see where that goes. But I said at the beginning, after we went to Portland, that I didn't think Aetherdrift was an all-timer at first. I think it's actually maybe a top 20 or 25 draft set. Like, it's not in the top 10 by a long shot, but I do think it's an extremely solid set. And I think it turned out to be a lot more fun and interesting and deep than a lot of people thought. So hat tip to you, Aetherdrift Limited, as you are driving off into the sunset.
Top 20 is still high praise. So
Yeah,
There's at least 30 sets in Magic the Gathering's history.
exactly.
So. Two things, Dave.
Yeah.
First of all, you'll still get to draft Aetherdrift again on Arena when they do the rotation of budget drafts. They always go back to recent formats.
Yeah, I don't think I'll do that. I mostly just draft whatever the latest set is, but maybe.
Can I show you something?
Yes, of course.
Can you tell the listeners what I'm holding?
He's holding a shipping box from some place, a FedEx box, I suppose. And
I'm
what's
gonna open it.
inside?
oh no, this look like packs.
Don't look
More-
at this.
Oh, those aren't packs. That's a box.
Yet
Look at
another
this.
box of Aetherdrift.
Yeah, it's
Half open.
it's essentially full. I've taken out one booster pack.
Yep.
Gifted to someone. So, Dave, we can still draft Aetherdrift.
Yep. One more time.
I know some folks.
Yep.
How are you going to draft when you only have 35 packs?
He actually only has 29 because they come in boxes of 30 now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know what the
It's a
hell did
whole
that start
thing,
happening.
Devin. It's a whole thing.
Devin, you know
I
what we like
missed
to
that
do?
boat.
You're gonna like this. We usually do 6-person drafts. Everyone gets 4 packs.
Okay.
It rules. Your decks are so good.
Anyway, yeah, really enjoyed it and looking forward to playing some more.
I'm looking forward to playing a little bit more Magic too because the modern RCQ season is upon us. And we got a question from one of our Discord stalwarts, Jason, who I think has been with us since the Slack days.
Oh, for sure.
An old timer at this point.
One of the very first patrons that we had, for sure. Especially one of the very first patrons we had that we didn't know already when we started.
And has since become a good and close internet friend of ours.
Yes, exactly.
Following last week's episode, Jason asked a question that I thought would be fun for us to discuss briefly, maybe to wrap up this week's show, especially with the new format upon us, the new RCQ format upon us, which is how the different hosts prepare for an RCQ or RCQ season in general. Specifically, Jason asked, I, as the casual Spike, Doomwake as the person who has to entertain people and prepare at the same time via
Allegedly.
your Twitch channel. Yeah, I've never been entertained. And I've been writing letters to Twitch about you. Kind of like the BBC.
Do you address them to Jeff Bezos?
I do. And I try to get Jeff to put his thumb on the scale to force you to play the decks that only I like.
Gotcha.
And then, Dave, you are the spokesperson for the one RCQ per season player. How do you pick your deck? And there's a series of questions here. The first one being, how long does it take you to lock in a deck? I'm happy to go first.
Yeah, you go first.
Because I thought about this a lot over the years. I probably talked about this before, but I think we haven't really talked about this in a while. But I actually really like playing a deck to death. So my journey isn't per season per se. My season preparation has to do with the flex slots and the sideboards and playing as many matches online, but really in paper as I can to make as many mistakes as I need to finally learn my lessons. And the journey for me starts with a format defining moment, which is usually the release of a Horizon set, or previously it was Lord of the Rings, or maybe it's a BNR or unbans or something that really defines the texture of a format. And then following whatever the most recent format defining event is, for me, the journey is always identifying the center of the Venn diagram, which is the best decks in the format, and on one end, and the decks that I actually like to play on the other end, and figuring out not what's the best deck in the format, period, because I never really wanted to or enjoyed playing Breach, but what's the best deck in the format for me specifically, and what I like doing, and what I can enjoy doing ad nauseum, sometimes for a year or more at a time.
It's a good answer.
Mhm.
My answer was going to be a lot shorter than that. My honestly, it's just vibes. Like basically there was like a standard's a little bit different because it's a lot easier to acquire cards and change decks during standard season. So, I mean, I feel like I think I played, I want to say I played 6 RCQs and I think I played 6 different decks. So
Wow.
it's basically like just trying to change week to week, keep an eye on the meta. And standard is a format you kind of have to do that with at times because the meta can churn and shift and things like that. With modern, it is a lot more stable in terms of, for the most part, the metagame is what you would expect from week to week. Sometimes there could be some shifts in terms of what is, like Boros is the best deck this week, then it's second best, Eldrazi is best the week after, so on and so forth. But it's, with modern, it's kind of sort of similar to what Stan was saying, where it's just, I have like maybe 1 or 2 decks, and I'm just going to, based on metagame trends and what I see happening online, I'm going to choose one of the 2 that, has a better chance against that expected metagame. Now, not always that your local store is going to be, keeping up or paying attention or mimicking the MTGO metagame, but I feel like at least for the most part, it's a good understanding of where the format is.
Yeah. I think for me, my answer is closer to Devon's a little bit in a way. Mine is sort of a mix of what cards I can reasonably get my hand on in modern, like what decks can I possibly finish without hurting my bank account too much or using up too much Card Kingdom credit, or even get like sometimes the cards that are really popular that get popular, I can't get a playset of in time. I tend to decide to go to an RCQ, like which one I go to, with pretty short notice. It'll be like 10 days. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to this one. So I do pick things that maybe are a little bit what I have. Plus, I kind of like to play not non-meta decks. I like to play tier 2 decks for some reason. I think I do that a lot. Like, I think I should just acknowledge I kind of like to be the person who's like, oh, I'm playing a weird choice. I'm playing Oculus with rings instead of Oculus itself. I'm playing with, I'm playing Zoo this weekend instead of Breach or Eldrazi or Boros, even though I have Boros. And so I do pick kind of like slightly roguish decks. I think I've always done that. So I would say it's that mix of what I have on hand that seems viable still and is kind of not the best deck. I think a little bit of that is me sort of just being like, I don't want to go out there and do terrible with the best deck. I'd rather be able to blame it on the deck a little bit, because I'm not practicing as much as other people are sometimes.
That's why you didn't play Breach.
But yeah, well, and Mox Opal, of course.
That, yeah.
But
I get it now, Dave. It's a defense mechanism.
if I'm being honest, I think there's a little defense mechanism there. But I think everybody, has different motivations that drive them. Like I'm going to pick something that's like close to Shadow or Prowess. That's probably what I'm going to pick. Those are the decks that I liked the most in the past. And so I pick things that are kind of like those decks still, if I can. Jason, who wrote in, big like combo player. He loves Glimpse, and so I think that he would continue to play those type of decks, when he goes to his one RCQ, because that's what he has and what he loves. So I think that's the space that the one RCQ season person is kind of in more. So I think the question I want to ask you after this is, we all talked about how long we are thinking about what deck to play with. Stan, if I'm the one RCQ guy, Devon, when it's RCQ season, you go most weekends probably to an RCQ, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, basically the last season I went every weekend until I qualified. I happened to get my 2 qualifications a little bit earlier, so like I said, I think I only went to 6 last season. But I think the modern season before I went to 13 or 14.
Yeah, yeah. Stan, where are you at on that continuum?
Not at 13 or 14, but at least 6.
I was gonna say, I think you go twice a month, maybe during modern RCQ season ish.
Yes, I leverage a year's worth of goodwill buildup and wife equity to either get my parents to take a child or
Yeah.
in-laws to take a child. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, let's go visit your folks.
Right. So I can do an RCQ in over there in Western Illinois. Yeah.
Yes. I feel like visiting the Quad Cities today.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I like playing RCQs more than going to the FNM.
For sure.
In fact, for me, if I'm not playing for stakes, paper play just doesn't capture my imagination, and I no longer really find it that enjoyable. And it used to be such that I preferred like FNM level play more than MTGO. And I'm at the point now where those two have flipped. I'd rather just chip away at a league over a day or two with something that I'm trying and actually get my cheap thrills from going to the RCQ. So yeah, I'll go like maybe 2 to 3 times a month if I can swing it. If you know, I can make childcare arrangements.
I feel that way about Constructed too, for what it's worth. Like for Constructed, I don't have a lot of interest in going to an FNM or like a casual midweek tournament. I'd rather do Moto for that. For Limited, I'm perfectly happy. Like if I'm going to FNM, I would like to draft with people. That's what I would like to do because it's more casual. It's like more relaxing. It's, you know, it's whatever. So that's kind of, I feel kind of the same way you do.
And that's really how I prep as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
Moto is a different type of preparation for me because it shortcuts so much. And a lot of my success and failures in competitive paper have to do with my ability to pay attention and keep track of things, which Moto just makes very easy for both players. And when I finally won an RCQ after years of trying, it was a season where I kept getting closer and closer to first the top 8 and then top 4 and so on. And I had to kind of, like I mentioned earlier, make a million mistakes and learn from them. And though there's some value in going through VODs and MTGO replays to observe mistakes and maybe relitigate certain lines, I still think that when I make a decision that loses me a game, it's not necessarily the line I picked, but something that I just kind of overlooked that is easier to overlook in paper than it is online. And I need to experience more scenarios in paper play to sharpen my play skills and then do, you know, somewhat well in paper, that even if it's not winning an RCQ, making top 8 or a performance that I'm otherwise pleased with.
Yeah. In Constructed, I feel so much more comfortable playing Moto than I do playing in paper, honestly. Like I make so many bad little mistakes just from losing focus or feeling a little bit uncomfortable being in like the shop environment or something like that, or just kind of like lose track of something. Yeah, for some reason it's harder. It's much harder for me to lock in that environment than it is when I'm here in my basement. And I can take a minute and like check a sideboard guide or like, you know, do a little bit of research real quickly in between plays or something.
Devon, when you do your seasons and you go, let's say anywhere between 6 and a baker's dozen, do you bring sideboard guides? Do you make them, or have you just committed these things to memory because you were playing so much day in and day out?
Vibes, baby. Vibes.
It's all vibes.
All vibes. I mean, I have in the past used sideboard guides, and I definitely don't fault people for doing it because it is a lot easier to remember it. But I think a big reason for me that I don't use sideboard guides is, and again, everybody's different, but for me, I just get lazy and I always I adhere to the sideboard guide. But one thing that I want to kind of bring up is, even if you have a sideboard guide, you should always don't consider that gospel. Like if your opponent has a card or something that you haven't seen before that you weren't expecting in their deck, and you that is going to change the way you sideboard, don't necessarily be like, oh, well, they're playing X, which means I sideboard out Y and bring in Z. Consider those different changes, and that's important to remember.
Nice. Yeah. I really like sideboard guides because I think I lose equity from thinking about individual cards between games. And it's just, tournaments are already so mentally taxing for me that I need to take every shortcut I can to kind of like save some brain power. Though I totally agree though. And I think I generally try to sideboard that way as well. Maybe in game 2, I defer to the sideboard guide. In game 3, I might make some vibe oriented decisions based on things I see or things I'm reading or feeling.
Yeah, or like maybe they sideboarded it in a different way that you weren't expecting, you know?
Looking forward to it. And it's right around the corner. We're already getting our announcements for the Midwest RCQs. I'm assuming, Devon, you're starting to see what's happening in your area as well.
I'm going to go to spicerack.now and check it out.
The only thing I haven't figured out yet is when the shop that's walking distance from me and is literally on my street is doing an RCQ, and that's annoying because that's the one I like to put on my calendar as early as possible. Mosey.
Yeah, the last time I checked, a lot of the limited ones were up, but a lot of the modern ones had not been posted yet. So I'll have to check again.
I haven't seen the one that's by you either, David, and that's the one I won last time, and I feel like I have to go back again this season because maybe that's my lucky shop.
For sure. I would take another look there.
For the next month, I only got 4 on Spice Rack, so it seems like they're maybe a little behind.
All right. Well, new format, kinda.
Sort of ish.
New set coming out with a new Mox in it. That certainly won't do anything.
There is definitely a new Mox.
Yeah. It's definitely one of the Moxes of all time. But we'll be looking into it in the next couple of weeks and months. And the other thing we have coming up, of course, is that we're trying to go to Indianapolis for the Modern Spotlight, the Secret Layer one, which could be fun.
We got to book our bunkhouse.
Yes, we do. Book that bunkhouse.
I might actually look at flights for that. I'll let you know.
Yeah, let us know. We're going to be celebrating all kinds of interesting stuff at that one.
Devon, you want to hear how loud Dave and Shane snore?
On second thought, maybe I won't look at flights.
It's not so bad. Once they're gone, you start to miss it.
I got a mouthpiece. I'm working on it.
All right, that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. If you use Apple or Spotify, please leave us a rating and review. And keep an eye out for the debut of What's That in Your Pocket? We're taking it off the Patreon exclusive feed and we're bringing it to a podcast app near you. If you'd like to reach out to The Dive Down, you can find us on Blue Sky. You can email thedivedown@gmail.com. I actually think the single best way to connect with us is through the Discord, which is gated through the Patreon over at patreon.com/thedivedown. But sometimes we see good ideas for episodes or questions, and maybe we'll make a better effort of incorporating those into the show moving forward. Maybe not. Also, check out the divedown.com/store to get some Dive Down swag designed by Dave, who is a design hobbyist, at least. It's certainly a passion of yours.
Passion. Yeah. Graphic design is my passion.
Head over to heavyplay.com to get some incredible deck and dice boxes, as well as playmats and carrying cases, all featuring their EquipMax system. If you use promo code TheDiveDown2025, you can get 10% off your first order at heavyplay.com. Shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring the Dive Down after all these years. And if you use promo code TheDiveDown, all one word, you can get 25% cash back after 3 months of the online rental service. And save some money on paper cards when the new set comes out over with our friends at Nerd Rage Gaming. If you use promo code DIVE8, you can get 8% off your order there. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and play, read, and explore, I guess.